In 1887, a writer named Alfred Barnard toured the distilleries of the United Kingdom and counted 28 of them working in Ireland alone. Irish whiskey was not a niche back then. It was the default pour in London and New York, and trade historians commonly credit Irish distillers with something close to 70% of the world whiskey trade in that decade. 90 years later, the entire island had 2 working distilleries left, 2. And to sell what survived, the industry reached for a single word and never let it go. Smooth. Smooth is not a quality marker. Smooth describes the absence of something rather than the presence of anything, and for roughly 40 years it was the whole Irish pitch, because the liquid behind it had been sanded flat for drinkers who did not want to think about what was in the glass. That has finally changed. As of March 2025, the Irish Whiskey Association counts 50 operational distilleries on the island of Ireland. So we are ranking 12 Irish whiskey brands here, worst to best, and I will tell you up front that the top 2 both come out of the same warehouse complex in County Cork. And the bottle I actually pour for myself is not the bottle I would call the best whiskey in Ireland. Hold on to that. It only pays off at the end. Number 12, Proper Number 12. Launched in September 2018 behind Conor McGregor, this is a blend of malt and grain whiskey aged in ex-bourbon barrels, sitting at 40% alcohol and around $27 a bottle. Here is the part the marketing never mentions. Proper Number 12 is blended and bottled at the Bushmills distillery in County Antrim, and the brand has always said it contains no Bushmills whiskey. The distilleries that actually made the liquid have never been publicly named. Proximo Spirits bought a majority stake in April 2021 in a deal reported at up to $600 million. And in November 2024, the brand removed McGregor as its face after a Dublin civil jury found he assaulted a woman. What is left in the bottle is thin, sweet, and built for a mixer. Pour it neat and you get vanilla, a flash of green apple, and a short, hot finish that vanishes before you have decided what you think of it. There is nothing technically wrong with it, and nothing worth returning to either. You are paying roughly Jameson money for a signature that is no longer even on the label. Number 11. Paddy. This brand goes back to 1879 and took its name in 1912 from a Cork salesman called Paddy Flaherty, who bought so many free rounds that publicans started reordering by his name. That is a charming story attached to a whiskey that has not been anyone's priority in decades. Pernod Ricard sold Paddy to the American firm Sazerac in 2016, while it was still the 4th biggest selling Irish whiskey on earth, moving 200,000 cases a year. Read that again. They owned a top 4 brand and handed it over so they could spend the money on Jameson instead. The blend carries an unusually low pot, still content. It lands at 40%, it costs about $25, and it tastes like a whiskey whose own maker stopped caring first. Number 10. Tullamore Dew. William Grant & Sons bought this brand in 2010, and for the decades before that, the whiskey inside the bottle was contract distilled down at Middleton in County Cork by a direct competitor. Grant spent real money fixing that. A new Tullamore distillery opened in 2014, a grain distillery and bottling hall followed in 2017, and the standard bottling is a triple blend of pot, still, malt and grain whiskey at 40% for around $28. I respect the investment enormously. The whiskey is still soft, light, faintly appley, and gone from your memory about 90 seconds after you swallow it. Building your own distillery is the hard part, and they did it when almost nobody else was willing to. Making something worth remembering is the part they have not finished yet. If you want to see what Tullamore can actually do, the sherry-finished and cask strength releases are a different conversation entirely. The green bottle on the bottom shelf is not. Number 9. Jameson. Now we get to the interesting contradiction. Jameson sold 11.1 million cases in 2025, which makes it the 3rd biggest whiskey brand in the world once you set Scotch and Indian whiskey aside, and it is made at New Middleton in County Cork from a blend of single pot still whiskey and grain whiskey at 40% for roughly $28. The same distillery, the same pot stills, and in some cases the same style of spirit that produces the 2 bottles at the top of this list. So why is it down here at 9? Because Jameson is engineered to offend nobody. Every edge that makes Irish pot still whiskey worth drinking has been diluted with light grain spirit until what remains is pleasant, warm, and completely anonymous. It is not bad whiskey. It is whiskey with the interesting parts removed on purpose. Number 8. Bushmills Original, the white label. The bottle says 1608, and that date is doing an enormous amount of work. In 1608, King James I granted Sir Thomas Phillips a license to distill in the surrounding region of County Antrim. The old Bushmills Company itself was not founded until 1784 by a man called Hugh Anderson. That is a gap of 176 years between the marketing date and the company. Proximo Spirits picked up Bushmills from Diageo in November 2014, trading it against the half of Don Julio tequila Diageo did not already own. And here is the fact that ought to be on the front label. Bushmills is a malt distillery. It has no grain stills at all. Every drop of grain whiskey in this blend is bought from Middleton, the distillery that makes Jameson, and trucked north to mature in Antrim. The oldest name in Irish whiskey buys the bulk of its flagship bottle from its largest competitor. At 40% and $28, the malt underneath is decent and the grain drowns it. Number 7. Kilbeggan. The site at Kilbeggan dates to 1757 and markets itself as the oldest licensed distillery in Ireland, which puts it in a permanent argument with Bushmills over what the word licensed actually means. What nobody argues about is the gap. Distilling stopped there in March 1954. The place shut for good a few years later. Cooley bought the ruin in the late 1980s, local volunteers restored it, and spirit did not run again until 2007. 53 years dark. The brand now belongs to Suntory Global Spirits, and the standard blend in your local store is not made at that pretty old site at all. It is distilled at Cooley in County Louth, double distilled rather than triple, at 40% for about $27. Light, grassy, a bit of vanilla, nothing offensive. The history is far more interesting than the whiskey, and I would still rather drink this than anything below it. Number 6. Connemara. Everything you have been taught about Irish whiskey says 2 things: no peat smoke and 3 distillations. Connemara is a peated single malt that is distilled twice. It comes from the same Cooley distillery as Kilbeggan. Under the same Suntory ownership, it sits at 40%, and it runs around $45. The smoke is soft and sweet rather than medicinal, sitting on top of a light malt body that cannot quite carry it. And at 40%, the whole thing feels underpowered. But this bottle matters more than its score. Connemara is physical proof that triple distillation and the absence of smoke were commercial habits, not laws of nature. Irish distillers dried their malt over peat fires long before cheap coal and hot air kilns pushed the smoke out of the whiskey in the 1800s. And the entire modern Irish revival is built on a generation of distillers going back through that history and asking which rules were ever real. If you have been avoiding Irish whiskey because you think it is all light and sweet, this bottle is the argument against you. Before the top 5, do me a favour, drop your guess for number 1 in the comments right now before the reveal, because a lot of people are about to guess wrong and I want to see it happen. I go through the comments on every video and I answer the ones that push back hardest. If rankings like this are your thing, subscribing takes a second. Now the top 5, where Irish whiskey stops apologising. Number 5. Teeling Small Batch. Jack and Stephen Teeling opened their distillery in the Liberties in Dublin in 2015, the first new distillery the city had seen in over 125 years, in a city that once had dozens. Bacardi took a minority stake in 2017, went majority in 2022, and announced full ownership in June 2026. The small batch is triple distilled, fully matured in ex-bourbon and then married in Central American rum casks for up to 12 months, bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered for around $40. That specification is the reason it sits this high. Higher strength, no chill filtering, and a finish you can actually taste. The rum influence brings brown sugar and a slightly syrupy sweetness that will not suit everyone, but Teeling proved that Irish whiskey could ask for more money by giving you more whiskey. Number 4. Waterford. Mark Rainier, the man who rebuilt Bruichladdich in Scotland, bought a former Guinness brewery in Waterford in 2014 and did something nobody in Irish whiskey had tried. He contracted dozens of barley farms across 19 different soil types and distilled and bottled each farm separately, with a traceability code on every bottle that takes you back to the exact field. The single farm origin bottlings run at 50% for about $62, and they are startling, full of raw cereal, orchard fruit, and a chalky mineral edge that no other Irish whiskey has. It is also a warning. The distillery went into receivership in November 2024, and an American company, Tennessee Distilling Group, took it over in 2026. Waterford made the most intellectually serious whiskey in Ireland and could not make the numbers work. Buy these while they still taste like Rainier made them. Number 3. Green Spot. Back in the 1800s, Irish merchants bought raw spirit from distillers and matured it themselves. And the Dublin wine family Mitchell & Son, in business since 1805, ran exactly that operation from 1887, marking their casks with dabs of coloured paint to track the age. Blue for 7 years, green for 10, yellow for 12, red for 15. Most of that range died out from the 1950s onward and came crawling back decades later, though Green Spot itself never stopped. Green Spot today is single pot still whiskey distilled at Middleton, matured in roughly 3/4 ex-bourbon barrels and 1/4 sherry, bottled at 40% for around $59. It is bright, orchard fresh, faintly spicy, and the most elegant Irish whiskey under $60. The only thing keeping it out of the top 2 is that 40%, which sands off the edges of a spirit that has plenty worth keeping. Number 2. Power's John's Lane release, and this is my favourite Irish whiskey. James Power founded the original John's Lane distillery on Thomas Street in Dublin in 1791. By the 1880s, it covered more than 6 acres of the city centre, and in 1886 it became the first Dublin distillery to bottle its own whiskey rather than sell it by the cask. It closed in 1976 when everything moved to Middleton, and in 2011 Irish distillers rebuilt the old John's Lane style as a 12-year-old single pot still whiskey at 46%, aged in American oak with a portion of Oloroso sherry casks for about $71. What you get is thick. Oily, honestly, in a way almost no other whiskey in the world is. Baked apple, clove, black pepper, and a mouthfeel that coats your teeth. That extra 6% of alcohol over its stablemates changes everything. This is the bottle on my shelf with a permanent dent in the level, and if I could only own one Irish whiskey for the rest of my life, this is it. Number 1. Redbreast 12-year-old. And here is the distinction that matters, because favourite and best are not the same argument. Redbreast started as a merchant whiskey too. The wine merchants Gilbey's, founded in London in 1857 and trading in Dublin from 1861, bought new make spirit from Jameson's old Bow Street distillery and matured it in their own sherry casks, and around 1912 the chairman, a keen birdwatcher, gave it the name. Gilbey's stopped producing in 1985 and sold the brand to Irish distillers in 1986, who relaunched it in 1991. Today it is single pot still whiskey from Middleton, aged in a combination of Oloroso sherry casks and ex-bourbon barrels at 40% for roughly $65. It took gold and the category win for Irish pot still whiskey 12 years and under at the 2026 World Whiskies Awards. So why does it beat the bottle I actually prefer? Because Redbreast 12 is the benchmark that the entire category is measured against. It is the whiskey that proved single pot still. That awkward Irish mash of malted and unmalted barley born from a tax dodge on malt was not a historical curiosity, but the best thing Ireland ever made. It is available almost everywhere. It costs less than the John's Lane, and it will genuinely convert a Scotch drinker in one glass. Powers is the bottle I love. Redbreast is the bottle that saved the category and set the standard everyone else is now chasing, and that is worth more than my personal taste. Which brings this back to where we started. An industry that fell from 28 distilleries to 2, that spent 40 years selling the word smooth because it had nothing else, is now 50 distilleries deep and making the most characterful whiskey it has produced in a century. Ignore the word smooth entirely. Look for single pot still on the label, look for 46% instead of 40%, and look for the name of a real distillery instead of a celebrity. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing, and we will see you in the next one.